and welcome everyone to our webinar for this afternoon. I'm delighted to have today as a presenter Shara McBride. Shara is one of our active classroom facilitators. She's a curriculum writer as well, and we just love having her participate here with us at Social Studies Full Service. And tonight, doing a webinar, you could just say that she's a multi-talented, multifaceted person, and we're just excited about the session for this evening because I think it's a very important topic and one that a lot of people struggle with. So Shara, thank you so much for being here, and I'm going to turn the session over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam, and good evening to everyone out there in Active Classroom Land. And just again, as Pam said, welcome to our webinar tonight, titled Helpful Points for Building Strong Relationships between Social Studies Teachers and Academic Coaches. So by the end of this evening's webinar, you will have identified and discussed best practices in establishing strong relationships with social studies educators, as well as developed at least one next step in applying information learned during the webinar. So of course, we will have an agenda starting with a nice little scenario, and this will be interactive, so please jump in when you feel the need. So we'll have a scenario or two, maybe even three. What would you do? A scenario for academic coaches or maybe even aspiring academic coaches. We'll talk about student-centered coaching and the whys behind student-centered coaching, following up with our partner teachers and being consistent. And also we'll have a few final thoughts based on today's topics. So here are some webinar norms and procedures. The first thing that I would like you to do is just relax. I know we've all had busy days, whether we're in the classroom, outside the classroom, what have you. Just let go of any anxiety that you have. I mean, we're all a part of this wonderful community that we call education. And so we just want to be open and free. Also relate. So if there's anything that resonates with you, something that you relate with, or if you just want to share your ideas or any connections, please do so. And you can do that. GoTo is pretty user-friendly, so you can use the messaging feature to do so. And then also release. Again, if you have any questions, comments, or perhaps even concerns, please, 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 just go ahead and give them to me. All right. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, my name is Shara McBride. You can just refer to me as Shara. I am a native Houstonian. I was in the social studies classroom for 8 years. I've taught everything here in Texas, from 6th grade world cultural studies to 7th grade Texas history, as well as 8th grade U.S. history. I've been an instructional coach, social studies instructional coach, focusing on middle school for 4 years now. And I'm also a curriculum writer within my district, writing courses for 6th grade world cultural studies and 9th grade world geography. So now that we've identified our objectives, you know who I am. Let's go ahead and look at our big idea for today. So our big idea, or this webinar, I should say, rests on the idea that the best way to build strong and long-lasting relationships based on trust and collaboration is through student-centered coaching model. So that will be the bulk of our conversations and examinations today. So we're actually going to start, as I promised, with a little scenario, okay? So as I said before, you do have capabilities here to respond using the messaging feature. So please, if you'd like to respond, do so. So here it is. Raina, a first-year academic coach, was recently assigned to a veteran teacher, Mr. Jennings. So we'll say Mr. Jennings has been teaching for about 15, 20 years. He's a true veteran at Gregory Middle School. Raina and Mr. Jennings completed their initial meeting 2 days ago, so they were able to meet and greet, you know, talk about the teacher's goals and whatnot. However, Raina is not quite sure of what to do next. Now, if you were Raina, this first year academic coach, what would you do? Okay, what would be your next step with Mr. Denning? A, would you schedule a meeting with Mr. Denning to plan a lesson? Let's just jump right into it. B, would you send a lesson you developed for Mr. Denning to review? I mean, you're a coach, I'm pretty sure write pretty good lessons, and maybe he wants to see one and teach it the next day. Or C, would you schedule a meeting with Mr. Denning to set student learning goals? Okay, I saw one C so far. And I'll wait for a couple more responses.
I think there's also an A on there, Shardra.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I miss A?
There's also a response that said A.
Oh, okay, let me see. Oh, I see them now, yes. Okay, I see C. Okay, I see an A. All right. Any others? Wait for a couple more responses. Okay, let's see. All right, so if you chose C, that's definitely an answer that we were looking for here. So schedule a meeting with Mr. Denning to set student learning goals. So I think one thing that's really at the core of establishing relationships with teachers is just having common goals. And I would also say at the heart of, you know, any teacher-coach relationship has to be the students that they serve. So in addition to conducting those initial meetings with teachers you'll support and collaborate with, you know, it's important that you begin with common goals based on identified needs. And of course, these needs are really also based on, you know, teacher observations and things that they've seen in their classrooms, things that they've noticed. And also just conversations that you've had with the teacher. So, you know, sometimes the teacher doesn't readily identify the needs of his or her students. So as the coach, and again, in building that relationship, those are conversations that you can have together. I think it's also important, again, in this whole relationship building, that you identify and develop goals that are attainable and also valued by everyone. So goals that are measurable, those that you can see the progression. And then also just making sure that not only is it something that you value, but also something that the teacher sees as valuable, something that the teacher can commit to. And then, of course, I think and kind of an overarching idea here is just making sure, again, in this relationship building, that the students are at the center of the relationship. They drive every single thing that you and the partnering teacher does. So in this instance, I would say if we go back to Raina, she's definitely using what we refer to as the student-centered coaching model in building this relationship. So I think, you know, I've used student-centered coaching at least 2 or 3 times. I know definitely with our big idea, I mentioned it, but I'm thinking maybe we should actually define what that is. So if I go back and think about Diane Sweeney, who is just this wonderful student-centered coaching guru, Diane Sweeney identifies 3 different types of coaching models. Okay, so the first one is the relationship-driven coaching. And I understand we are within this webinar itself, we're talking about building relationships with teachers. But the difference here is with the relationship-driven coaching model, it's more of the coach as the provider of resources and praise, as opposed to the person who's actually collaborating with the teacher. You also have the teacher-centered coaching model, which focuses mostly on the teacher, mainly what he or she is or is not doing in the classroom. So in this particular instance, it's the coach, looking at particular practices and seeing where there should be adjustments made. And again, based on the teacher alone. And then of course, it's the student-centered coaching, which, as I said before, will be the bulk of our conversations today. And this is where, again, you're focusing on the student through various collaborative activities. So, as an example, collaborative planning between the coach and the teacher, modeling, and focus debriefs, and also co-teaching. And especially with the modeling, it's not just the coach going into the classroom teaching and saying, hey, I've done this, now you go ahead and do it. But instead, coming together and looking at, teacher moves, looking at those flows and grows, what worked, what didn't work, and then going from there. Collaborative activities such as analysis of student work, actually sitting with the teacher and identifying, highlights in student work and also gaps. So with the student-centered model, it's truly building a relationship through common goals, through student-centered coaching. Are there any questions so far? Okay, so probably get some questions later. I think another important thing with student-centered coaching, and the reason why we should use this in building relationships with teachers is that it truly aligns with the goals of education. So when we think about, there's several goals to education, but I think one just being to help, helping students in building and utilizing their 21st century skills. And I think the best way that you can do that is through collaborative work. As an academic coach, through this model, you get to work with the teacher and work with them in a way where you are truly equals, because we know that, as a academic coach and even as a teacher, you have a certain level of expertise. However, that should never overshadow the coach-teacher relationship. And I truly feel that student-centered coaching allows teachers and academic coaches to realize this. And also, it's just a partnership that's based on, honesty, trust, and respect. And I think this is one of the most important parts, because it really changes that mindset, seeing the coach and the teacher not as two different types of educators on two different levels, where the coach is here above the teacher, but instead they're both co-owners of the work, okay, which I feel truly, lowers defenses and anxieties, and also gets rid of that resistance that you sometimes get as a coach in, the initial phases of working with a teacher. Another really great thing about student-centered coaching and building this relationship is that it allows that teacher voice and choice. So, I mean, this goes back to, goal setting, setting goals together, which is largely dependent on, the insights provided by the teacher. So it's the difference between the coach going in and saying, hey, this is what we're going to do, and the coach going in and saying, hey, based on your observations, based on conversations that we've had, what do we do next? So we being the operative term here. And I think another thing is, student-centered coaching is, you're able to implement it through cycles. So in setting the goals, you get to plan instruction together, implement together, reflect, make those adjustments. So all in all, it's a true partnership when you're going through or using the student-centered coaching model. Any questions so far? Questions, comments, concerns?
Shardra, I don't have a question, but I've really enjoyed what you're saying here about the student-centered approach, because the people that I hear from most are always kind of anxious about the coach coming in. They feel like the coach is there to somewhat evaluate them or to critique what they're doing or to point out their faults. And I think this approach would really, like you said, it would reduce a lot of the anxiety and would build that relationship so that it's not so threatening to the classroom teacher.
Absolutely. I think, as you said there, the biggest thing here is just the coach showing that they're truly all in, from beginning to end, and it's not evaluative. You're not coming in as an appraiser, but instead as a partner. Okay, I see a comment here. Okay, from Dr. Rogers. Oh, absolutely. And that's one thing we're going to talk about briefly towards the end, Dr. Rogers, this whole idea of reflecting on your work and how you can do that. So I really appreciate you saying that. All right, so let's go ahead and go to our next what would you do scenario. All right, I have another one for you. All right, so now Raina and Mr. Denning have set student goals, so we're on the right path, and learning targets, and are ready to begin planning for instruction. Now, Raina knows that good planning involves developing teacher moves and lesson practice. However, Mr. Denning is a little shy, and he is not happy about practicing in front of an audience. What would you do in this instance? Would you, A, enlist the help of Mr. Denning's appraiser, because maybe Mr. Denning needs a little push. B, offer to plan and practice the lesson with Mr. Denning, so going all in. Or C, we don't want to make Mr. Denning any more nervous than he already is, so we're going to avoid planning and practice all together. What would you do? All right, Dr. Rogers says she would choose B. Okay, any other responses? All right, Pam, we have a B. Okay, any others? All right, so if you chose B, that's definitely the response we were looking for here. So I think, of course, you never want to make your partner teacher uncomfortable. However, I feel that when you're willing to make yourself vulnerable and open to criticism, that takes away a lot of the nervousness, especially on the teacher's part. So in this instance, and again, with the student-centered model, it really encourages that the coach goes in and serves as a partner. So in this particular instance, the planning and the practice helps both you and the teacher in tailoring instruction, but also in building trust, because these types of activities really involve brainstorming. That planning piece together, involves exchange of ideas, and also just trusting each other enough that you're open to not only giving, but also receiving constructive criticism. Because again, you're putting yourself out there. Not only if we're in a planning session and we're practicing, not only am I going to take a piece of that lesson, you're going to take a piece, but I'm going to take a piece of it as well. So it can really show, that we're all in this together, let's go ahead and go to our next scenario. So good job on that, guys. All right, so our next scenario. So Raina and Mr. Denning have planned practice and successfully co-taught a lesson together. Okay, so Raina was definitely all in there. What should Raina's next step be? Should Raina email Mr. Denning a few days later to inquire about scores on student products? Because we know those student products aren't going to score themselves. So should she just email him? Should she immediately debrief with Mr. Denning and schedule a day and time to analyze student products? Or do you think she should collect student products immediately after the lesson for calibration purposes? So meaning she just takes those products, perhaps takes them to whatever building she's housed in and just use them for calibration. All right, what's your thinking? All right, so we have B, debrief together from Pam. Sounds good so far. Any other responses? Okay, Dr. Rogers chose B as well. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and see. All right, so again, if you chose B, great job. So I actually think, everyone, that, you know, this is one of the most important parts of building relationships through student-centered coaching, because really the partners, one, get to see and examine the fruits of their labor. So just taking that student work, thinking about the goals and identifying, you know, any highlights, you know, really great things, positive things in that student work, and also gaps. You know, it's a great time where you can give that constructive feedback. And again, that constructive feedback, not based on what the teacher did right or what the teacher did wrong, but based on the original goals and where you can go from there. So not just that reinforcing feedback, but the, you know, conversation where, okay, we originally thought that this would happen. However, this happened, so where can we go from here? So feedback based on collaborative decisions. I think this is another great time, again, in the relationship where you can discuss next steps. So where, again, do we go from here? You know, we've taught, we see what adjustments we need to make. Now, what's our next step in this cycle? Okay. And then also just going back to this whole idea that through, well, building these relationships through student-centered coaching, again, it just shows as the academic coach that you are all in. I know I've used that quite a few times. I sound like a broken record at this point, but I think that's very important to understand. That being all in is really one of the, I think, the most important ways to move the work. All right, any questions with that? Comments, concerns?
I'm just seeing how this applies to so many situations. And, you know, we do a lot of our work virtually like this, and I can see how even in a little bit different environment, a little bit different role, that these same principles can be applied. So I'm just saying kudos. This is really good information for all of us.
Oh, well, thank you. And I, you know, I think it's just, again, that collaborative piece, you know, that old adage, you know, two heads are better than one. I think definitely applies here, especially as it relates to building those relationships through collaborative work with teachers. With that said, you've gone through, or Raina, we'll go back to Raina, has gone through all of this entire cycle with Mr. Denning. Things are looking on the up and up. So where do we go from here? I think the biggest thing is to just think about this idea of following up and being consistent. So from here, definitely as the coach, you want to make sure that you follow up often. Okay, this is truly the next step in taking your relationship with the teacher even further. So that follow-up can come in many different forms. I think one-on-one is definitely best. Sometimes you have to email, just making sure that you're staying in touch, and whatever goals have been made or changed, adjusted, we want to make sure that we're always working towards them. So again, following up is very important. And also, I think there's a few understandings, essential understandings, if you will, that I think you have to keep in mind as you're continuing or even building these relationships. One being that the relationship has to be cultivated. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. In some instances, you may have resistance. However, one thing that I truly believe is that when you follow the steps of student-centered coaching and you follow them with fidelity, you will cultivate that relationship and be able to maintain it. Also understand that the relationship building takes time. As I said before, it's not going to be something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to take days, it's going to take weeks. In some instances, you might even see that it takes months. However, with consistency and determination and patience, which is the next bullet there, you'll find that the relationship with that teacher will get stronger and stronger and stronger every single day. So with that said, I just wanted to wrap up with just a few thoughts. So I think here, the big ideas here are just, it's just the best academic coach teacher relationship is definitely student-centered. Okay, so based on the needs of those who grace our classrooms every single day, based on a mutual respect, and I will include also, honesty and trust between the coach and the partnering teacher. I will say it involves 21st century skills. I know that's a huge buzzword in the education realm. And what I mean by that is, building those relationships through student-centered coaching is going to take some critical thinking on your part as the coach, some collaboration on both of you and the teacher's part, definite communication on both of your parts, and also sometimes you even have to be creative in maintaining that relationship. And then finally, it involves consistency and determination. Again, I've said this several times, just being all in. So in closing, we've discussed building relationships with teachers through student-centered coaching. And what I like to know is, what are your next steps in this? So whether you're a coach, an aspiring coach, someone who works with coaches, what do you want to do next? And here are some ideas. Perhaps you'd like to engage in a student-centered coaching book study. I've mentioned Diane Sweeney, who has a fantastic book called Student-Centered Coaching, The Moves. I highly suggest, if you haven't read that book, definitely go out and buy it now. And also consider archiving your coaching work. And this is just a really great way to reflect, engage in reflection on what you're doing now. Start thinking about your next steps or adjustments that need to be made, apply and reflect more. And I promise you, as you're archiving, you're going to see those positive changes in your work with teachers. So with that said, are there any questions? Oh, I see some next steps. Okay, lovely. And this is from Dr. Rogers. Okay, so my next steps are to use this webinar to begin a PD series. Oh,
I love it.
Yeah. Yes.
I love that. That's fabulous.
Yes,
and
yes.
I think my next step is I've got to get this book and read a little bit more from Diane Sweeney. This has just been such a great introduction tonight. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
Delighted
It will
to
change
see
your
you.
life.
Thank you. It's been so good.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, well, that's all I have. If there aren't any other questions or, I see
I
another
do see
next
another-
Brandon, yay. So my next steps will be to continue the practice of archiving my coaching and be reflective. Absolutely, Brandon. Absolutely. Move that work.